are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me today is the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question, because what on earth are the Philadelphia Flyers doing? We're going to get into this in just a second. Before we do that, check out our YouTube channel. Okay, that's it. What on earth is Chuck Fletcher doing, Kevin? The big news of today, and we will talk about Claude Giroux, and we will talk about the trade deadline. We have a lot to get into on that end, but we have to start with the Rasmus Ristolainen 5-year, $5.1 million AAV contract extension. Kevin, we've talked a lot on this show about the need for a rebuild and the need to completely strip it down and stockpile some draft picks and sell off everything not nailed down at the deadline. And Chuck Fletcher goes and signs a guy for 5 years at a decent amount of money. What's going on here?
What do you think's going on? I'm throwing it right back to you before I talk.
Well, I believe the words aggressive retool are going to come out of your mouth.
They will at some point.
It sure sounds like Chuck is attempting to patch the sinking ship.
Okay. Is that completely what you believe, or is that?
Yeah, it seems like. I don't really know, to be honest with you, because it seems like you're trying to get a guy locked up for long term, but he's the kind of guy that you could trade right now. You could trade Rasmus Ristolainen, retain salary on him, and get a return. Now, is it going to be a first, a second in Shane Gostisbehere? No, it's not. But the sunk cost fallacy is real, and it seems as though the Flyers have doubled down on that and decided not only are they not going to trade him and recoup some assets, they are doubling down and signing him for half a decade.
Okay. Is that where you're leaving this one?
I guess. I want to hear your opinion on it. I don't really know how you feel.
Okay, because I'll explain it, because there's a lot of people. We all know that Ristolainen's a polarizing figure, right?
That's a good
we all
way to
know
put
that. We all know this. When he was acquired, there's two sides to the argument. There's the, hey, he's physical, he's big, he can do this. They didn't have that. Okay, great. And there's the, oh my goodness, have you seen the numbers on the guy? Have you seen his analytics? Like, there's two sides. And truthfully, he probably falls somewhere in the middle. He's not near as bad as the analytics numbers completely tell you, but it doesn't mean he's good.
Right.
Which, figure it out. What is perfectly down the middle of you're mostly okay in certain areas, but the numbers aren't great.
And for the record, I'm just going to summarize it.
What is that?
I'm just going to summarize it, by the way, for the people who don't necessarily follow the analytics crowd or the analytics scene. The general consensus on Rasmus Ristolainen in the analytics scene is, quite frankly, that he's a black hole that makes every player on the ice worse. So okay. I agree that he hasn't been that bad this year, and I was a big critic of the moves that it required to get him, and I don't think he has played well enough to prove those criticisms false. I still think you paid too much. I still don't necessarily think you should have moved assets to move Shane Gostisbehere just to acquire him. That being said, he hasn't been nearly as bad as I thought he was going to be.
That's fair.
He's been a supremely serviceable NHL defenseman for a bad team.
Serviceable is even arguable. He's been okay.
There have been certain nights where he's been your best defenseman, and I know that's not saying a whole lot because this is a steaming pile of garbage. Yeah. It's a steaming pile of garbage with Ivan Provorov on top, who doesn't look happy this year. Yeah, it's not great in the defensive core. Now that I really think about it, it's pretty ugly.
Okay. So, but you're hitting the area. Like you haven't said the magic word to me yet, but you're hitting the area, because bar is set low. There are nights where he's your best. Most nights he's somewhere in the middle. There are nights where he's bad, but you kind of take all of it collectively. He's going to have his moments. He's going to make mistakes that are noticeable. Some nights he's going to be perfectly fine. You know the magic word I'm looking for?
Okay.
Average.
Okay.
And that's my problem with the deal.
You can't pay an average NHL defenseman $5 million
no,
a year?
That's not my problem because
Okay.
$5.1 million is an average annual value for a player like this is pretty much on par with where the direction is going. This is, if the guy plays top 4 minutes and is right-handed, right. It's a commodity. For whatever reason, teams go crazy when it comes to the guy's right-handed and he's bigger and he's playing top 4 minutes. He's playing 18, 20 minutes a night.
It's because there's not many of them.
Right, but it's a crazy, there's this crazy obsession with you got to have a guy like that. And this is why when the Flyers traded for him, there's reports about, it wasn't just them. 7 teams were willing to throw a first on the table. They just had the highest. Right. Well, all right, then that's why people go crazy. He's right-handed. He plays top 4 minutes. At the time, he was playing top 2 minutes.
Well, and for a long time, the argument was, well, it's Buffalo. How's he going to do with a real team? And to be honest, he hasn't played with a real team yet.
He still hasn't.
But, man, I for the record, I do feel bad for the guy personally because he's like 7 or 8 years deep into an NHL career and hasn't played a playoff game. Ow.
So, But the way I had to try to explain it, I wanted to explain it I was explaining it to some, because I try to look. You know this. I try to stay as level-headed as I can when it comes to the way that I analyze things. There's 2 sides to it. There's, I'm not going to go overly crazy on the analytics say so. That's the end-all be-all. I'm not going to sit there
sure.
and I don't need the eye test or analytics to tell you one way or the other. He's right in the middle.
Right,
he
and
some
you and I are
nights, but he's not great.
Right, and you and I have pretty similar feelings about analytics. We both kind of fall on that sliding scale somewhere in the middle where, we take them into account, but they're not, like you said, they're not the end-all
Which, for
be-all.
what it's worth, is, I don't know if you saw this or not, because, Crossing Broad does a really good job with some of the ways that they break things down. Obviously, Anthony Sanfilippo is really plugged in.
Crossing Broad and quality journalism. Whoa, what a shock.
All right, don't go and, throw them under the bus here. Okay?
No, I'm not. They're great. No, legitimately. No, I was
No, because they are doing
They're
a great
actually fantastic.
First of all,
yeah.
Well, first of all, Anthony Sanfilippo is really plugged in, so he's giving you a lot of and I'm not saying I don't go out there and then follow basically for lack of a better term, report what he reports. I'm not writing stories all the time based on what he says. I throw it in there occasionally because it's hey, by the way, this was mentioned sometimes.
He's not your confidential source.
Well, that's not how it works anyway. You don't just use that's not sourcing, that's aggregating, which is totally different. Either way, it's he's really plugged in. But I don't know if you saw this or not. There was a story that Chris Therien did because Chris Terrian's part of the podcast that they have over there.
Right.
No, the goalie. He talked to other I think 3 coaches or something of that nature. I'd have to go back and pull up the article. This was early in the week. This was last Monday. So it's obviously a lot of stuff's happened, and I've read a couple things from their side that, maybe are more fresh in my mind than that particular article. But talked to 3 coaches about how much they value analytics.
Right.
And it was basically everybody has the same attitude that I usually take with it, which is we all use it. Every team anymore has a department for it, but there has to be a level of evaluating just from what you see too. So it was a split, it felt very split down the middle. Nobody was saying they make a decision based off of the numbers alone. And most of the time, one of the other keys that people are going to sit there and say is you can read and take your pick. There's multiple websites. There's multiple people on Twitter that are breaking things down. They'll sit there and say they have their own model for how they analyze, right? All this type of stuff. Teams do that too. So if you want to sit there and look at anybody who's put a chart up on Twitter, no disrespect to them, most of the teams are sitting here going, we don't have the same numbers that you do.
Yep.
That's all I'm trying to get at is,
and a lot of the good analytics people have been hired.
Well, that exactly
right.
Well,
so the models that are out there just aren't the top quality models because those people have been hired.
Well, either that or it's something that they don't agree with, and that's why they haven't been hired either.
And And the teams also just have access to more data. Like they have all the player tracking data. They have real analytical breakdown.
They do,
data.
but the other part of the equation with that is that okay, you have people who are literally solo acts on Twitter. That's the best way I can put it, where they have a model, they run numbers. Every time a guy gets signed, they can put out a thing with 5 charts on
Here's his scorecard. Right.
What that one person did in who knows how much time.
The teams had that done for.
No, I'm saying that takes like 5 people in an analytics department to do that for a team. They've got multiple people who work on those things. So, like, that's the way it's going. Like, those people probably should be hired in one way or another because they could put more focus on a certain aspect of their analytic process.
Right.
You know what I mean? As opposed to just because they do one full set of analysis and another team is doing, oh, let's do it this way for 5 different people, and they come up with their own number because they're tracking things differently than other people do. This is what they consider I'm not saying this is exactly the way they do it, but I'm just looking for an example quickly because I don't want to spend 20 minutes on this.
Right.
They track zone entries differently.
Right.
This is what we consider a zone entry. This is what you're going to count as a controlled zone entry or a non-controlled zone entry. Right. Like
there's different criteria, right? Like there is with any model.
That's all it is. It's just that.
And I did see multiple people kind of poking fun at the fact that the Flyers announced they were like tripling the size of their analytics department, and then their first move is to double down on a guy who's not exactly beloved by the analytics community.
Because I think it has nothing to do with it.
I know. It's just funny. So back on Ristolainen, where do we go from here? Like, obviously, he's going to be a Flyer for the next 5 years, but what does that mean for the trade deadline? Does that change anything? Like, obviously, it changes that you're not moving him, but does it change anything else? Like, do you think any Flyers that were previously maybe on their way out are now on the table to stay? Like, for example, Derek Brassard or...
No, because if you're on a 1-year deal and you haven't been... Ristolainen, there was always only 2 possibilities. It's either you're getting traded or you're re-signing. There was no in between.
Walk at the end of the year. That's not an option.
Because they spent too much to get him in the first place. It's there's a big difference between Derek Brassard didn't work out at the deadline. We can't trade him. that was
we eat the $2 million. He
contract.
walks. No big deal.
It wasn't even that.
Oh, you're right.
Brassard was less than $1 million. Like. There's a big difference between, we tried the low risk, high reward signing. He couldn't stay healthy enough. We weren't a good enough team. We should have, we tried to trade him. Nobody would take him. I guess we just have to ride out the rest of the year on 9.
No big deal. Somebody's got to play.
You know who's going to end up fitting that bill more than likely? Keith Yandel. Like, Yandel's probably the guy he's here for the rest of the year. I don't think he's obviously, I don't think he's sticking around beyond this year. But I
don't think anybody brings him in just as an extra, like a body in the playoffs? A voice in the room.
I'm not going to call it impossible because
he goes for a 6th or whatever, conditional 7th.
I'm not going to call it impossible. Hell, they traded Eric Gustafsson last year.
Oh man, you're not wrong.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not happening at all. But I'm also not going to say I expect it. Brassard's different. I think Brassard's actually turned it on just a little bit here lately that it's going to open enough eyes that somebody will give you something for a guy like that for a playoff run.
So, did we have anything else on Ristolainen, or do we just want to move full-blown into our trade deadline preview?
Well, we can get there kind of. Like, I need to talk about what the Ristolainen signing means.
Yeah.
Because, again, I call it, he's a perfectly average player. Now, I'm trying to make sure we didn't go too far off the rails because we got into analytics all of a sudden. It kind of took me off of the money aspect of it because...
Right.
I've had to kind of try to explain that a guy and again, it kind of goes back to where I brought up Crossing Broad for a second, because they had the story, like Anthony Sanfilippo had a story out about how there was a report, or he was reporting that from a source that they had a 6-year, $6.25-ish million AAV on the table for Ristolainen. Now listen, again, I'm fully crediting Anthony because of the fact that he is plugged in a lot of ways, and
he's about as creditable as it gets.
And so he got half of this right from the source that he got it from. It was half right, and that's not to discredit him.
Right.
Like, He was absolutely 1,000% on point with the fact that, like, hey, don't be surprised if there's a contract extension coming. They actually are talking about
They're
it.
talking.
That's
right.
the right part. There's no way, and this is nothing against him or his source, but there's no way that there was ever an offer for more than $6 million on the table,
Because it would have been snap
it would have
taken if
been
he ended up
signed.
on 5.1.
He signed for $5.1 million, so there was no offer for $6 million. That's just logic. That's not anything against what a source is telling you.
And you never know. Maybe that was what he was asking for, or maybe that was
not unless the only way they were going to the $6 million was
the 6th year.
It's the 6th year, and he might have wanted a little bit of an earlier out.
Maybe give him one more chance to sign another contract.
That's the only way I can see that being completely 1,000% true. But I find it hard to believe that a guy would not just say no to $6 million, but then also take a pay cut. From what he made on the previous contract, which this was the hard part that I had to explain to people, because there's a lot of people who are sitting here going, oh my God, why would you offer $6 million to that guy? Right. When he signed the contract that he's on, that he's finishing up right now this season, I think it was a 6-year deal with Buffalo, at $5.4 million of a cap hit. If you're making $5.4 million at that time to be a number one defenseman, basically. What do you think you're worth 6 years down the line if the minutes really didn't change? The role didn't really change. Like a top four defenseman now goes for $6 million.
You kind of think about, I don't know if you've heard the story of PK Subban in Montreal. And when he signed his bridge deal, he signed like a 3-year deal, and he told them, okay, I'll sign this 3-year deal at $5 million or whatever it was. But at the end, it's $9 million. And then when they came around for negotiations in 3 years, they sat down in Montreal and said, okay, what do you want? PK Subban said, $9 million. And they went, you're going to Nashville. But, down the road, but still.
That's a trade that...
Man.
You know what's funny about that trade in hindsight? It almost worked out for both teams.
It absolutely did. That might be one of the most even trades, even one-for-one blockbuster trades in history.
And that's I'm not saying it didn't work at all. Like, obviously it worked. Nashville was in the playoffs regularly with him on the roster. Montreal was in the playoffs again with him on the roster.
Yep.
It's a shame that Weber's hurt and his career is basically over.
Both guys made a Stanley Cup final.
Well, that's exactly my point. That's why I said it almost worked out for both. Either way.
Nashville should have won that 2017 Cup, man. They were so good that year. Sorry.
Yeah, they were.
Back on Ristolainen.
So the money doesn't bother me. $5.1 million does not bother me in any way, shape, or form. Is it the 5-year term? Well, the 5-year term is certainly a problem, because you're latching on a lot of stuff. If it would have been 3, I probably would have said, all right. Well, because think of the alternatives. They could have traded for Jeff Petrie. Like, that report was out there, and you're going, that feels really counterintuitive to what you want to do. That's a guy who's older. Like, at least Ristolainen, if you said 3 years, $5.1 million, you go, all right. At least he's 27, so you got him for the next 3 years. Maybe, okay, maybe. Like,
maybe you're good by that 3rd year, and he's kind of a top 4, top 6 guy, and in the meantime, he can kind of hold the fort down. Somebody's got to play. Right.
Like, there's 2 big issues with it, because and none of the 2 big issues are Ristolainen's fault, by the way.
No.
Because the 2 big issues are, number one, that you continue to kind of pump out this, again, and here's the first time I'll actually say the words that you've been waiting for, this aggressive retool that you talk about.
There it is.
That makes it sound like you think you're going to contend next year, which I don't see to be the case.
No, me neither.
And here's the thing. This is where my problem lies. First of all, let's talk about Ristolainen, the player, and why this makes very little sense from a front office standpoint. You spoke at this press conference about a few different things when it came to specific players, talking about the way that the team is playing now, talking about the way that it looked like it was going, talking about where you need to improve. And Chuck Fletcher was even interviewed yesterday during the game and talked about, we just need to add more skill and more speed and more depth and all this stuff. But we have some good pieces and good under 25 pieces, and we think we have something going here. That was basically I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically the gist of what he said.
Right.
And if you watched the actual game, which if you didn't, I don't blame you. It was the farthest thing from that. You're playing a top 3 team that miraculously was a 1-1 game until 4 minutes to go.
And by the way, your goal was from Derek Brassard.
Which is actually fine because you right now that's exactly the type of player you need.
Pump that trade value. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, actually, if nothing else, the shame of it is, and I'm not disappointed that the Flyers are now home for 3 of the next 4 leading up to the deadline while Claude Giroux is sitting on $8.99.
It's kind of a shame that the one road game, though, is like the timing is poor.
It is, but it's not. I don't think it's going to matter, to be honest.
No, I understand, but still.
Look, if there is any way to salvage one night of this season to make it enjoyable, to call it your top night of the year, let Claude Giroux go scoreless tonight against Montreal, come in on Thursday against Nashville, and score a goal which moves him into 8th place all-time by himself in franchise history in goals, and gives him the 900 points in his 1,000th game.
Man.
And that's the ride off into the sunset.
Man.
But, that's my point. Let it be something like that, you know?
I hope. And it kind of feels a lot like 2 years ago, or 2019. Holy, 3 years ago. You're coming into the Stadium Series, big emotional game.
Right.
And you know you're trading Wayne Simmons. Pretty much. It just, man, it feels a lot like that. You're right.
Yeah. So let's go back to Ristolainen for a minute and about what this means. So you're going to talk about all those areas and things like that, and it's, you know, but you were talking about how so Brassard's the one scoring the goals. That's good for them.
Sure.
Giroux's been quiet.
He has.
It's weighing on him, and you can see it in his.
He's gripping the stick.
He's trying to do a little too much.
Yep.
And also for lack of depth around the organization anyway, because of the fact that, again, when you take Sean Couturier out of the lineup for the whole year, when you end up having to move when there's other guys get moved around. Now Scott Lawton's not playing because he took a hit. He's out. You've got, Kevin Hayes, who's still playing at a percentage of himself.
The hit that hurt Scott Lawton, by the way, clean as hell.
I didn't see anything.
Man, it was a nasty hit. It was clean. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about it, but it was a nasty little hip check.
Right. So there's just not enough. You're just not going to get enough when it comes to hey, look, Giroux's got to be the guy. I think Giroux will play with an energy going into Thursday that we haven't seen, and I don't think it overly affects what. I think it affects it maybe a little bit, but I don't think it overly affects what they could get back in return for him, because at the end of the day, it's still a guy with the career trajectory that says he's worth your time in a playoff race.
I was going to say,
you can add him as depth. Nobody's asking him to be the superstar wherever he goes.
And he's known around the league as one of the most quietly competitive guys. I talked about that Stadium Series earlier, and I assume you watched the Mic'd Up, the Wired afterward, and he bet Doug Peterson he'd win the ceremonial face-off. Come on.
Oh, right.
That's a competitive guy. And he's going to be a monstrous asset to whoever adds him for the playoffs. He is going to come in with fire. Do we have to get into it now? Are we done on Ristolainen?
No, because I'm still on Ristolainen.
Okay.
Why does it make any sense? Because you're sitting here talking about how Derek Brassard's the only one scoring goals.
Yeah.
Which is not really true. I mean, he's only got 2 since he came back, I think. So
I know. Either
way, it's those are the guys that you're going to try to move, and that makes all the sense in the world. And I don't know, it's not. Giroux really needs to be it needs to be a little bit of a game changer, and that's why Ristolainen being moved would have helped too, because it's the next highest game changer. I mean, Justin Braun's going to net them probably something pretty nice too. I don't want to say it's not. It's the truth. Again, think about Justin Braun for a minute here. Veteran right-handed defenseman.
Yep.
People go crazy. Get
Has
ready.
Some deep playoff experience.
All I'm saying is that, and because the next time we have a show, it's all trade deadline, right? Everything that happened. Don't be surprised if there's a second-round pick coming back for Braun.
Really?
Seriously.
Okay. I was thinking third or fourth, but okay.
For a right-handed vet on the blue line.
Okay.
Don't be surprised if a second-round pick comes back for Braun. Or I don't want to just lean on that it's only a second-round pick, or that he may not be part of a package.
So something that I've seen speculated is that the Ristolainen contract pushes out Travis Sanheim. A, do you think that's true? B, do you think he gets traded before the deadline?
No.
Okay.
Or well, no to the second question.
Okay.
Does it push him out? Maybe. I don't think it should.
Because he's up after next year, correct?
Yes.
At 4.7-ish?
Well, and listen, I'll tell you why I don't think it should. It shouldn't because when Ristolainen's telling you the reason that he feels like he signs is because of the fact he likes all of his teammates, but he does really like playing with Travis Sanheim. And Sanheim kind of, those nights when you're going to sit there and say, oh, he hasn't been as bad, those are nights where usually Sanheim's lifting his game just a little bit.
Right.
Sanheim's had moments where when he's on offensively, when he's really showing some aggression, showing some confidence with his offensive ability, he's on.
Right.
And that's the full...
And he's been wheeling recently.
That's the full potential of the player.
Yeah. And he's been playing pretty well.
My problem with everything about the Ristolainen deal is the term is a bit of a problem because it's latching on to me for the next half decade an embodiment of what the previous decade was, which is we're perfectly average. The message is not contending. Like when they sit there and they say they think they can contend next year, contend for what exactly?
So
and,
what you're looking for is a shape up or ship out mentality. And instead, we're accepting the norm and mediocrity.
No, what I'm looking for is an actual honest approach that isn't, hey, you know what? We think we can throw at the wall and hope it sticks.
Right. This team should, and I have the cap friendly pulled up. Mm-hmm. The team should be willing to trade James Van Riemsdyk with a year and a half left on his contract and retain half salary. Because you don't need the money next year because you're going to be bad next year, and you can maximize value and get a haul for JVR with a year and a half left at $3.5 million. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, and it's funny as hell that you're going to say they should because they won't.
I know they won't, and that's why I said they should be willing to, because that's the kind of move that you need to make to get a haul back.
I don't even think that's going to get you even close to a haul.
Oh, I supremely disagree. I think the problem with JVR is that 7. And I think if that 7 turns into 3.5, that's a whole different animal.
He's having quite possibly the worst year of his career, though.
I understand.
So his values are
low
an
on
all-time low. Like, I don't know that a team out there is even willing to sit there and say, yeah, $3 million. You know who is? Arizona. Because they need
fair, but that doesn't do anything.
No, I know, but I'm saying
they would take the whole deal.
But that's the type of team that it's going to appeal to. And otherwise, you buy him out and say someone else go sign him for whatever you think he's worth.
I was going to say JVR might end up playing with Shane Gostisbehere again next year.
Does it look like he's having a bad time out there, though?
No, he's doing great, and he looks like he's having fun.
I know they're not a good team. Does it look like they're having a bad time?
No. Shane Gostisbehere looks like he's having fun, but to be fair, he kind of always looks like he's having fun.
He wasn't having fun here last year.
That's because he wasn't playing.
No, it's because they wouldn't let him play the way that he should, which, start adding up who they don't allow to play the way they should.
Yeah.
But they do that a whole lot. All right.
Go ahead.
I think that the Ristolainen deal, here's the problem with it to me. You've got people in the front office, a lot of the focus, and here's the thing. You sent me on Friday night. The deal was fresh from Thursday. You send me Friday, the Dangle podcast, and they actually didn't even focus on anything Toronto Maple Leaf based for a change and title it as such. They literally just titled their podcast Chuck because Steve Dangle has some personal vendetta against, as much as it might be a personal vendetta against Chuck Fletcher. Don't let him spend your money, blah, 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 all that type of stuff.
Sure.
Which in reality, I think is a little bit dumb, only because of the fact that there are half of the teams in the league have ownership that can hand a general manager, any general manager, money and say, here, just spend it like it's nothing. And most teams do, and most teams make bad signings with them. So it's not like he's alone.
Well, to be fair, they do also rail against kind of the general old boys club, and a lot of those guys are guilty of that. So, fair.
Okay, that's my problem.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't think that Chuck Fletcher's making this signing on his own.
Okay.
I don't think he's the one who's infatuated with Ristolainen. I think that this is a guy who sat up there at the halfway point of the season and tried to sit there and tell you that they need high impact talent, which everybody agreed with.
Yep.
Tried to tell you, then gets asked, so how do you get it? Started to talk about building through the draft, sometimes high draft picks. Let's this way, without having to say it, we all know they're getting one this year. They're getting a top 5 pick this year, probably, right? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Good news for this year, but it's not the best draft. But you'll get something in the top 5. Top 5 picks usually are pretty good, no matter what draft year they're in.
Sure.
Usually, big old hard exception on 2017. Outside of Cale Makar.
I was gonna say, you want Cale Makar, Miro Heiskanen? Who do you want?
Heiskanen's good. Oh, now Heiskanen, I don't know if you saw this. Heiskanen just got diagnosed with mono. So
I know. Well, wishing him a speedy recovery.
Yeah, that's no fun. That's awful. Especially for the type of player he is, because he's fun to watch. Yeah. No, but like Heischer's not the guy. Heischer was a first overall pick. He's not the guy. Like Jack Hughes is more the guy, right? It doesn't mean Heischer's a bad player.
No, he's
Nolan Patrick
better
can't
than
stay
the player
healthy.
we ended up with.
Nolan Patrick can't stay healthy. Pedersen's pretty good, but I don't know that he's like through the roof good on that team, because he's not the leading scorer out there. It's not like he's the go-to. JT Miller's more of a go-to than Pedersen is.
I'm still telling you, Nolan Patrick scoring a clutch playoff goal for Vegas this year. Mark it.
You have an awful lot of confidence in his health then.
I'm not saying he's going to play 20 games. I'm not saying he's going to score 25 points.
You think
but he's going to score
a game?
He's going to score
and
a goal.
One big moment. We'll see. I mean, he doesn't exactly have a lot.
Yeah, but Vegas isn't super deep in center, so if he's healthy, he'll play.
No, I know, but I think that they play him in a role where he's not exactly out there trying to go score goals every night right now.
That's fair.
That's just me. Either way.
Fair.
All right, so I don't think Chuck Fletcher's the one who's infatuated with Rasmus Ristolainen. I think that...
Name names.
You already know the names. Who are the senior advisors on the team? You know what...
Rasmus Ristolainen would be a great Broad Street bully, wouldn't he?
But it's not that, okay? Because I saw a lot of people on Twitter who were kind of trying to, not defend it, but like sitting here saying, Broad Street bully mentality, we kind of misused the term for, it's the Fight Club.
Right.
It's not. It's not just fighting. They were a tough team to play against, and they had Hall of Fame skill behind it to back it up. I don't understand the infatuation for 5 more years with a guy who literally the label of his game is he's big and he hits people.
Right.
I don't even know if you can sit there and completely say full, all the physicality. That's what they're going to lean on. That's the way I wrote it, because that's what they're going to lean on.
We traded Robert Hagg and Shane Gostisbehere for both of them in one player.
I can't even say that for Gostisbehere, because he didn't even move the puck that well.
But you know what I mean, though. He kind of brings a little bit of that offensive spark. He does have... He's more offensive than Robert Hagg. Fair enough. But...
Right.
It just...
My point is that I sit there and I even sat there and described it, because I said, you know what? This is the type of player that Bobby Clark and Paul Holmgren played with as players.
Drool over.
Let alone that they loved when they were in management. Let alone what it was always all about.
Yep.
Like, you got to look at the way that the game's going. Look at the way that teams play against you. You defend way too much, and you don't have anybody who really moves the needle when it comes to, hey, that's a really skilled guy who can carry the puck and get you offensive zone time. Hey, that's a guy with some speed.
Right.
You don't have any of that. So if this is the start of the so-called, hey, I can write a blank check for whoever you want, that's a really weird one to write a blank check for and say, and again, I'm not even criticizing the money of it. The money of it's actually pretty normal for a top 4 defenseman. Just this top 4 defenseman who by minutes and being a right-handed shot alone.
Just because a guy plays top 4 minutes doesn't mean he's a top 4 defenseman.
No, but I think he could be.
Fair.
The problem is that he's not playing next to a guy who like in Sanheim, Sanheim's not consistent enough to be the puck moving guy all the time. He just isn't. He's not like that. And they don't get any support from the forwards to make it easy to move the puck out either, which would change the game too. If Ristolainen could be the last guy back and have an outlet more times than not, he might be a better puck moving defenseman, because he's making a play to get the puck out of the zone and they are moving in the right direction. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And then you're talking about a team that basically for the next 5 years, and this was the way I read it, who for the next 5 years told you, You know what contending is to us? If we can just get in the playoffs, we're in the tournament, and maybe we can make a run. That's what they told you that is acceptable.
Right.
And I think that is absolute. Like, if you want to sit there and say giving Ristolainen money like that is organizational malpractice, which is a term I've heard. I think even Snow the goalie used that. Because you got to remember something. A podcast was more than just the two of us going back and forth like Snow the goalie is with three people.
Things get a little more hyper.
Well, no, it's not that. There's varying opinions.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna like, and Anthony's kind of like the way that I am when I'm on here, because I have to kind of pump the brakes and go like, listen, I'm just trying to tell you how the league operates, because I'm down there all the time. You hear people talk, that kind of thing. But if you want to sit there and say that $5.1 or $6 million for Ristolainen is organizational malpractice just because you don't like the player, then I think you're a little bit off base.
Fair.
If you want to say 5 years for a guy like that, which just screams average, is organizational malpractice, you got a point.
Okay.
Because you're accepting.
It's the combination. It's 5 years at that number.
It is, but you're accepting. Like, there needs to be an element of, and this is why I keep saying it the way that I do. I think you'd have support from people if you just admitted, hey, you know what? The next 3 years aren't going to be good.
Right.
Sorry.
They're going to be pretty poor.
We need to tear it down, and we need to start to build it up through the draft again.
Put out a letter like the New York Rangers did.
Right. And there's going to be new everything, and eventually we're going to come out of this on the other side. And when we do, we want you there with us, which is kind of what Ristolainen tried to say when he had his little press conference too, which is like to sit there and say like he wants to be here for the other side.
When we turn it around next year, which is all he's ever going to say, because that's fair. And they're players, and they're always going to play their hardest, and they're always going to try their best to win.
And players have to talk like that, because if they sat there and they said, hey, I want you to think about why Shane Gostisbehere is not here. Because if Shane Gostisbehere came out and said, I don't know what to tell you, we're trying, but we're not winning games, and it's not like this isn't fun, this isn't good, blah, blah, blah. Like, being brutally honest doesn't help you when it comes. Like, think about if you were ever brutally honest about your shortcomings at your job, what happens?
Oof.
They let you go.
Okay, so I do want to mention, since we're on ex-Buffalo Sabres who have been brutally honest this week, you heard Jack Eichel's comments after the Buffalo game, right?
Yes, I did, and there's two sides to it, because I think that I think that he doesn't need to worry about that. If fans boo him. Welcome to playing on the road, kind of. Yeah, I know it's been a little while, but welcome to playing on the road in front of fans. At the same time, I don't know what Buffalo fans are pissed off at him for, when all he wanted was a fair medical procedure and medical practices on a thing that he felt like would get him back into a game, and they flat out denied him it.
And that's my thing, is I think if it was your typical contract dispute where the player asks for more money than the organization's willing to give them, and they ask for a trade, or they don't like the coach, or they don't like the GM, or they don't like their teammate, or if there's some sort of drama involved and someone's getting traded, I understand a little bit of heat. Or if someone walks away for more money, like the John Tavares situation, I understand the heat. This is a guy making the best decision for the rest of his life.
Right. So
this is neck surgery, man.
You know what? Like, here's where I'm at with that comment. I don't know if it's a comment that Eichel needs to say with a microphone in front of him, if you will. Like, in terms of, that sounds like the thing that you say to your teammate in the locker room afterwards, like where you sit there and go, boy, that must be the first time they've ever been that energetic about anything in 7 years. All it took was trading me for them to get like that way, for them to be into the game, right? And to an extent, I get it. Like, you're frustrated, you lost the game, you didn't, your team didn't win, and your team's not playing well at that point. But by that point, you're talking about a team that lost in Philly and lost in Buffalo. It's not a good week for you.
So it's funny that you mention that that's the kind of thing he should say in the locker room. So, I'm a little bit of a pro wrestling guy. We've talked about it just a bit on the show. We've touched on it a little bit. See, I saw in his eyes that Jack Eichel knew what he was doing, and he knew he was turning heel. He knew that in Buffalo, they already hated him, and he just steered right into it. It's Bret Hart in the United States in 1997. When he's in Canada, he's a hero, but when he's in the States, they hate him. That's exactly what Jack Eichel decided to do. You could tell he had that line locked and loaded.
But you know what? Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just fueling things. I mean, let's put it this way. At the end of the day, he also has the last laugh anyway because he's going to the playoffs in a couple weeks.
And
quite
frankly, note on his execution, the promo works a little bit poor, Jack. You can do better than that. You got to say it with a little more conviction. He kind of whipped out on it.
You know what? That might have helped me a little bit. Like the way it was said was almost like bitter.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
But he kind of wimped out on it. He didn't really let it, vit and venom fly. He kind of went, it's the loudest I've heard it.
Well, and again, I think it's better. Like maybe 2 hours later, it would have come out better. Like 10 minutes after a game,
he was still breathing heavy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we lost. We should have, we were in that game. We should have won. We didn't. I guess all it took was me leaving for them to feel like that. That's the way it was said. It was almost said like muttering it. Like,
yeah, next time I expect you to grab the mic, look directly into the camera, and go, "I never liked Buffalo." Next time you hear me, Buffalo, this Saturday at WrestleMania.
I mean, maybe it would have been better, but either way, I think that back to wrapping up the Ristolainen and stuff and what I think it means because of the fact that
and we do have to get to the trade deadline and Claude Giroux here.
Well, here's the thing: trade deadline preview. This was half of it.
Yeah, because we expected Rasmus Ristolainen to be going. Like before...
I didn't expect it completely. I figured it was going to be a Scott Lawton situation, come down to the wire. But I didn't think that they were. I didn't think they were going to have. If they were going to do a deal, I didn't think they were going to do a deal a week and a half out.
That's fair. A little closer to the last minute there.
It really came together quickly. Now, I think that was also there was some pressure on Ristolainen, by the way. I think because the fact that you could stick to your guns and say, I'm built for the playoffs. I want to go into the playoffs. I want to go and see if I can show them what I've got. And then enter the free agent market and see if you can't get more. But was anybody else going to pay you $5 million?
Right. Or are you signing for 3.5 somewhere?
Right. Or was your next trip going to be, okay, now you're playing for a good team. Let's see what happens. And, oh, no, he fell flat. Look at what this guy did in the playoffs.
He gets to stay the big fish on a bad team.
Kind of. And look, you know what? Listen, something else to consider, and this is going to apply to a couple people. This isn't going to just apply to Ristolainen. It's not going to. It applies to Claude Giroux. It applies to Justin Braun at this point. Braun has a little bit less of a say, I'll call it.
Right.
Because Braun doesn't have the no move clause. Now, that's
right.
Ristolainen doesn't either, for what it's worth. But Ristolainen, when it comes to, hey, a team, like the Flyers were always interested. The key to any trade was Ristolainen was going to stick to his guns and say, I'm built for the playoffs.
Please get me to the playoffs.
Please get me to the playoffs. And they would have had to do it if that was the case. But he also was still interested in staying in Philadelphia because it's only year one. And they were interested in keeping him. Having mutual interest and somebody telling you, hey, we brought you here. You've uprooted your life from Buffalo to Philly. We're not going to make you uproot your life again unless you really want to. And in his mind, like there is a human element of it where you go, I don't want to move.
Right.
Now,
trust me, I know.
Now, Justin Braun doesn't have a say in that. And I don't think Justin Braun really cares because I think Justin Braun's at a point in his career where the clock's ticking. You might want to go somewhere where you have a shot. And I don't know if he cares. Like, there's nothing to indicate that he cares, even though his name's come up. Claude Giroux, on the other hand, is a different story. Because if you're Claude Giroux and you're 15 years into a career and you came in and you were a kid, you came a literal kid, and now you're 34. Now you're married, 2 kids, life built in Philly. It's not so easy to just say, let's go ahead and move. I don't think that should mean he shouldn't go somewhere else.
Right.
I think that in fairness, you have to bite the bullet.
Yep.
This is not about that's not about for a shot to win. That's about the organization will do anything for you. You owe it to them to know what you're staying around and just letting the season play out means.
Oh, right.
So you owe it to them to at least get what they can
let them get the assets.
You. Yep. Now, here's where it gets cloudy because.
So you say that, and by the way, I do agree with you for the most part, but I do. He's earned his no move clause, and I respect his right to not exercise it if he chooses not to exercise it.
Right, that's not where I'm going with this. I understand that.
Okay.
But here's where things get cloudy in that respect. What's the worst thing that could happen here? Like, what's the worst case scenario with Claude Giroux?
We could sign. Oh, never mind. With Claude Giroux. Oh man, I don't know. What do you?
that he doesn't get traded,
Right.
and then still walks at the end of the year.
Right.
That's the worst case scenario. I've said before, if you're not going to get what you think he's worth, you can do a lot worse than having Claude Giroux on your roster.
Sure.
Now, I'm not defending the fact that it probably is time. It's been 15 years. At some point, you got to turn the page, start a new chapter.
You respect him enough that the price stays pretty high, and if no one reaches that price, you hold on to him. Because if the guy is a flyer for life, then the guy's a flyer for life.
I don't know about that.
So you think if, for example, nobody offers a first-round pick, and the best you get is like a second, a third, and a decent prospect for Claude Giroux, are you taking that?
I'm not happy about it. I think that they still need to try. Like,
you think the stockpiling assets is important enough?
No. Here's where I'm going with this. If that's the best you're going to get for him, if he's also dead set on finishing his career with the Flyers after the fact, then I don't.
You need a contract extension.
Well, no, but I don't have a problem if he goes to, hypothetically speaking, Florida.
Okay.
I'm picking a team that's in the race.
Right.
He goes to Florida. Florida gives you 2 draft picks, not a first, but gives you 2 draft picks, maybe a prospect on top of it, because they're scouting people left and right.
Although I wouldn't mind Owen Tippett for the record.
Owen Tippett's okay. I think that if you're gonna go Florida, you need what's the kid's name? Denisenko.
Okay.
I think you need that kind of level player.
Depends on what picks you're getting back, but yeah, I agree.
But either way, let's say you get that, but then there's kind of like a handshake agreement, like we're moving you for the next 2 months, and then we'll sign you.
And then he comes back like Thomas Plekanec did.
Now you've done a lot worse. Like you could have done a lot worse than trading him for a few assets, and then he comes back.
That's fair.
I don't think he's going to come back. Here's the problem with me thinking he's going to come back, or with me hearing people think he could come back.
Yeah.
You never, a lot of people stay, for a player like Giroux, who's been in the same city for 15 years, the concept of change is a kind of frightening one.
Yep.
I have to move my whole life where?
But is Florida,
the grass... Florida, Colorado.
But is the grass greener?
And, well, exactly. And you never know unless you go.
And if you go and you win, that creates bonds.
Right.
You go 25 games deep in the playoffs with a group of guys,
right,
and raise the trophy. You got some bonds there.
Right. And listen, there's different elements to it, because there's one element where, listen, you can argue the case that, okay, he's been in Philly his entire career. It's hard to leave when you've built the life here, but you have a wife and 2 young kids. It's not like the kids are in school yet at that age. Like, you're sitting here, at that point, you sit there and you go, okay, you don't have to completely uproot your life.
You still have a little flexibility.
Or not completely uproot your life, but it's not like you're telling your kids, hey, change schools. It's not like you have 10-year-old kids
involved in soccer, and
it's not like you had your first kid when you were 27 and you're 37 now trying to win, but also sitting here saying, I got to find a new school for my kid.
Right, like the Kimmo Timonen situation comes to mind. I think his family just stayed here, right?
Difference.
Because he was retiring.
Yeah, but if Claude Giroux's 38, 39 years old and it's the final chapter, legitimately, then you're not really uprooting your whole life. You're saying, hey, for 2 months, I'm going to go do this.
You're Ray Bourque in it.
But sort of, because Ray Bourque stayed another full year.
Oh, you're right. He did, didn't he?
Because they didn't win the first year he was there. They won the second year.
Right.
Sunset. But either way, in Giroux's case, if that was all it was, then yeah, you know what? For 2-3 months at a time or whatever it is for that portion of it, you make trips back to your family whenever you can. You fly them out whenever you can. You get an apartment where you can hold everybody, and
any game within 3 hours they're coming to. Yeah,
as much as possible, and things like that. Like, you do what you can.
Yep.
There's nothing you can do, but it's this isn't a guy who's got a year like the rest of this year or just this year and next year left. He's got
another contract in him. Right.
Right.
Another real contract, 3-4 years at several $1 million. Like, Claude Giroux has another real contract in the NHL waiting for him.
Well, and here's the thing, like, not to shift it back to Risto for a second, but the Ristolainen deal, for a little while, there was like a hint of a report out that was like, oh, this might include a no trade clause.
Oh,
or
Jesus
a partial.
Christ. It doesn't, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
But bear in mind, this is the type of stuff that can happen when you have guys with no trade clauses. Like, Kevin Hayes has a no move clause, right?
Yes.
You can just move him for anything?
No.
The guy's got to sit there and say, I'm willing to go somewhere. That makes it complicated. He holds the cards. He's got the leverage. And that may mean that Claude Giroux does not get you exactly what you think in return. I'm okay with it not getting you truthfully. I'm not okay with it, or I'm okay with it not getting you a crazy high-end prospect. I think picks are more important. I think you come away with less than a first-round pick, you got a problem. But I think a team is more willing to say, here's the first-round pick, because
it's an unknown. It's a bag. It's a mystery bean.
Right. You didn't pick that yet. It's an asset.
You might screw that up.
Right. You never know what could happen. Well, you might screw it up. You might not screw it up.
You might take Nolan Patrick instead of Cale Makar.
No, but you might not screw it up, and you might take a guy who everybody thinks is a good pick, and then the guy gets hurt and never plays. That's the risk, right, with the draft pick. So I think that's what they need to. But I think that's what they need to come away with, because of the fact that, imagine if they had, and I don't care when it is, 2 this year, 2 next year, whatever it is. Like, imagine if you have 2 first-round picks, and you already know that one of them's going to be high this year, and maybe the benefit of a 5-year deal with Ristolainen, with all due respect to the player by himself, because one player doesn't make or break a team completely.
Sure.
They might fall backwards into the rebuild they need.
I agree.
In terms of, like, listen, because to me there's two areas of concern with the amount of money that went into Ristolainen. It's, first of all, you told everybody, your message kind of is, we're accepting average. We're accepting, that contending to us is just get there. If you can just get to the playoffs, you never know what happens, which is a real, not really a good approach at this point. And the other part of it is that you're taking what assets you could have had in terms of cap space for next year to aggressively retool. Yep. And basically now what's going to have to happen, and this is why I'm not sure, like, if you could ask me about any player that could come up as a trade possibility, and I would tell you I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because for the entire season, almost the entire season, I've been convinced that Travis Konechny is going to get traded in the offseason. Just a gut feel. No intel here, but I've got a gut feeling that
he'll have 3 years left at 5.5, and you think?
But I have a gut feeling that he needs that they're going to sit there and it's going to be a change of scenery trade. Yeah, but
Jake DeBrusk, Boston,
not for Konechny.
I mean, involved in a deal, a larger deal. I just mean kind of as a starting point. Maybe.
But here's the thing. So you got that one, right? I think the Konechny might be a goner in the offseason. Sandheim, I'm thinking a little less now because of the fact that, Ristolainen says he likes playing with him. I don't know. You move a guy that the guy you just signed for 5 years likes playing with.
Right.
And then what about Ivan Provorov? Because Ivan Provorov's just having a bad year.
Man, he does not look
and he doesn't
happy.
Look engaged.
He doesn't look like he's having fun. He doesn't look
engaged at all.
No.
Do you realize what happened in yesterday's game? Because they're in a situation where it's a tie game. They might get the game. I'm not going to say they're going to win the game because they're not pushing the play actively.
But they're in it.
Well, but you're also 4 minutes away from overtime.
Yep.
Which, okay, overtime. Not that the points matter, but it gets you a point and maybe gets you a shot to win another game. And to that point, you've won 2 of the. You had won 2 games in a row. Lost in Florida, kind of badly. To be fair, the loss in Florida was probably the first time they lost a game that was like a total dud. Like, the first period was awful.
Right.
But that might have been the first time they've had a game like that where they were like completely out of it in 20 minutes in a while.
They've played a decent little 20-game stretch or so here.
Right. They've had a majority of their games where they've lost lately they lose the third period. The first 2 periods are okay. They're in it. And the third period does not go well.
It really is nice what happens when you get NHL players back.
Kind of, but you see how short they are still. Like, they're not good enough to win those games.
No, otherwise not.
And to a respect, to that respect, I understand why you would say maybe. Well, we think we can contend because
right.
because in truth, if you could just add a little bit, like, who's to say that in those games that they lost to Pittsburgh or to Washington down the stretch, or Minnesota for that matter, that you're losing down the stretch, 2 goals in rapid succession, all of a sudden the lead goes to a loss, right?
Right.
Who's to say that if you're not throwing Sean Couturier out there and Ryan Ellis out there and guys like that,
Yep.
that even just a few of them, I'm not saying it means they were going to be in a playoff spot by doing that.
Right.
But who's to say they're not like still kind of in the running a
Better.
little bit and you're closer?
Right.
Maybe that's it. I don't know. To me, the problem is that's the problem with the Ristolainen trade, because the Ristolainen signing, because of the fact that now that you've linked so much to him, you don't have much of anything left to say. Let's improve with it. Outside of, well, Couturier's coming back next year, and Hayes will be healthy next year, and Ellis is coming back next year, and it's like, well, that's a lot of hope again.
Well, and like you said, they kind of have themselves set up for some change of scenery trades. We mentioned Travis Sanheim; he's a possibility. We mentioned Travis Konechny. You think that's gonna happen? You are set up for some change of scenery trades that could theoretically also continue to shake the roster.
Well, right, and I don't know that Provorov's going to happen or not, because here's the thing. You could make an argument now, and it doesn't mean I think that they're definitely dead set on trading him. You could make an argument though that Provorov is more of the guy that they are thinking about trading than Sanheim at this point, which in theory I think should be correct. Like, I think that you're going to regret trading Travis Sanheim today, because he's arguably been the best defenseman you've had this year.
Okay. I agree with that.
But I think you also don't necessarily want to move on from Provorov that early, in a sense that
he's gonna be good somewhere else.
Well, he probably will be, but his age, and what's the one thing that he hasn't had this year? He's playing with Justin Braun.
Yep. And
when things start to go wrong, it's not to say that it's Braun's fault, but when
look
things
at his
start
whole
to go
career.
wrong,
Who's Ivan Provorov played with? He's played with Andrew McDonald, Phil Myers, and Justin Braun.
Outside of
for a lot of his. Sure, and what was the year he looked the absolute best he's ever looked in his career?
Right, but I mean, you do have to wonder if that's the ceiling.
Okay, but if that's the ceiling, it's worth the 6.75 we got him at.
Okay, let me.
Is it worth more than that? Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let me rephrase it then. Not wonder if that's the ceiling. You have to wonder if that's the outlier.
Okay, but
it's
the only season he played with a competent partner. That's the outlier.
No, it's not completely, because there's also an element to it where he's now how many years into his career is he now? 6
or 7. 6.
Okay, at some point in time, it can't be I'm playing with the wrong partner.
I understand, but
you got to take a step up and be as good as you were average. Like
I don't think he is number one franchise defenseman. Mark Howe, Chris Pronger, but the best we got him at that year he was with Matt Niskanen. And by the way, I think healthy Ryan Ellis is a better version of Matt Niskanen, so I assume we would see a better version of Ivan Provorov as well. That's the only season we've seen him with a competent coach and partner at the same time. And that was the best result we've gotten out of him. You're the best team in the league going into the break.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's a tough one right now, because I wonder if you're going to be a number one defenseman, like everybody seems to think that he is and everybody wants him to be, and like I'm sure he thinks in his head that he is, especially for where you were drafted, you can't let the partner be the problem, you can't let the coach be the problem, and you certainly can't let everything that continues to pile up mistake-wise weigh you down like it is right now.
I think that's fair.
If that's the case, down to the fact that at one point in time, I think that the Sanheim-Ristolainen pairing was getting more ice time than Provorov was, then there's something to be said for that.
I wonder how much that is weighing heavy on his chest. Like now that the team is struggling and he has visible on ice leadership, I wonder if maybe that's kind of affecting how he's playing the game.
Yeah, it could be. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that he needs a change of scenery, but like, look, you're gonna have to start to get really creative with it. And who's to sit there and say that maybe, maybe you don't draft a forward with your high pick. Maybe you set yourself up. for it. You draft a defenseman, and Provorov gets you the forward.
Hopefully. That's not impossible.
I don't know that they're going to do any of those things. It's just complicated to me.
Yep, and we mentioned the fact that the Flyers are kind of looking to aggressively retool, and they're probably not going to break down and do the long-term rebuild. And
right.
It's tough for Chuck Fletcher because GMs don't have the luxury of saying, "Hey, if we're bad for 3 years, I know I'm still going to have my job at the end of it." Right?
Pretty much.
He has to manage for tomorrow because it's not guaranteed. Like, yeah, he's got a contract, but GMs get fired all the time. You don't have the luxury of and that's the hard part about being where we're at, right? Because it's easy to load up NHL 22 and go, "Yep, I'm just going to be bad for 3 years and rebuild," and okay, cool, because the NHL 22 owner is never going to fire you. Right? Like you're not going to get put out on the street when your team is 10-23. And he has to manage for next year, and
but this is why they won't get rid of him right now. Like there's plenty of reasons why Chuck Fletcher shouldn't have a job at the end of this year. You've gone through 2 years like this. You're not exactly doing anything that makes you any better on the surface. Why do you still have a job then? Because of the fact that when you break it down, Dave Scott's writing blank checks, and Bobby Clark and Paul Holmgren are still advisors, and this is their pawn.
The organization is rotten from the inside out.
No, but this is the guy who they can sit there and go, if we want it, he'll do it.
Yep.
Kind of. I mean, that doesn't.
I'm sure within reason.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't think that this is the way that Chuck Fletcher necessarily wants to build it, and I think this is just you got an owner who's going to sit there and go, or not even an owner. You have a governor who is the representative of the business that owns the team.
The ownership group representative,
right.
yeah.
That's going to sit there and say, blank check, here you go. Do whatever you want. So get ready for whatever big name coach comes in next year too, because it's probably coming. I disagree with it 1,000%, but it's probably coming.
Please don't be Rick Tocchet. Like I like you, Rick, but we don't need any more Flyers here. We don't.
Well, here's the thing. If it is, does it not validate everything I just said?
If it is,
2 former Flyers and a guy who was supposedly brought up under the tutelage of Ed Snyder. Not that this is Dave Scott's fault from the sense of if it's being an Ed Snyder move. I don't think Dave Scott gives a damn.
If Rick Tocchet comes in, I'm going to get a Connor Bedard Flyer jersey made.
That'd be pretty funny, actually. But am I wrong about thinking about the fact that this all could set themselves up for this kind like that on the surface right now? And I could change my mind if he makes any moves that I sit there and I say, okay, you know what, you improved in some way. But I'm not sure I see any reason to get excited about an offseason where your first blank check move, if you will, was Ristolainen for 5 more years.
Re-sign the guy, right?
Which not a bad contract in terms of
value and spot on the team.
And spot on the team. It's not. It's just it screams we don't care if we're nothing more than average. And I'm sorry, go into the building like I did on Tuesday against Vegas or last week, not the Chicago. The Chicago game was one of the best attended games of the year, but they played at home before that on a Tuesday or a Thursday night, very typical, and there have been Tuesday nights before where it's late arriving crowds. I think the Minnesota game might have been the one that I'm thinking of.
Okay.
And there was nobody there. It was like 8,000 people.
Yep.
If that.
This Thursday is going to be full, though, yeah?
This Thursday will. But my point is that does saying we're going to be average for the next 5 years or that giving that message, does that exactly win people over?
Nope.
So then what are you doing? That's the thing I have a problem with. Is to me, you're not winning anybody back at all. You're just continuing to spin your wheels in the middle of nowhere, going nowhere, trying to figure out the best way to build this thing back up when it's in front of you.
Trying the best way to put lipstick on the pig. Because
they'll make trades and they'll make signings and they'll do all this and that. Because I had somebody after the Ristolainen deal who sent me and I want to read off the line combinations because this was hilarious to me. Not in the sense that, well, there were two things in it that were hilarious to me. So I'm going to read them off, and you just tell me what you think I find funny about this.
Sure.
So someone says this would be my lineup for next year. This is someone who tweeted at me this.
Right.
Here would be my lineup next year. First line: Couturier, Farabee, Forster. Second line: Hayes, Brink, Gaudreau. Third line: Lawton, Allison, Wisdom. Fourth line: Lashinsky, McEwen, Ratcliffe. What do I find funny about that?
That's a Phantoms team.
That's not what I find funny about it.
That's a Phantoms team with 3 guys on a conditioning stint.
That's not really what I find funny about it, because there's an element of it where I understand it.
That's a wild lineup. I'm not going to lie to you.
It is. Okay, but what are the two parts of this that you think I find funny?
Bobby Brink, and I like Zay Wisdom being up there, to be honest with you.
Okay. I'm going to have to count it on the fly here, but let me try to count on the fly for a minute, because that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. Let's say 5. Maybe maybe even 6 is the best way to put it. That's a group of 12 forwards, right?
Yeah.
There are 6 forwards in that group that have maybe played a combined 5 NHL
games. Right.
Which, if Morgan Frost is any indication, what makes you think they're going to ice a lineup with 6 guys who barely have NHL experience?
If that's the lineup for the first preseason game, cool.
And here's the thing. I understand the point. Forster should be really good. He's developed a lot.
Fair. I expect him to get a long shot in camp.
Okay. Bobby Brink is having one of the best college seasons right now.
I agree.
Again, I understand it. The problem that I have with it, first of all, with all due respect to the fourth line of Lashinsky and Ratcliffe, it's not enough experience to say
that
go out there and but it's not.
Nope.
I don't even let McEwen on there because of the fact that, to me, McEwen's a replaceable player. This goes back to the infatuation with guys who are a little bit rough and tumble.
Yeah.
But a little bit rough and tumble because it looks like they're giving more effort and energy than somebody else. Don't get fooled by that.
But Zach McEwen's really good at tipping pucks wide of an open net.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say he's really good at coming close to scoring but never actually scoring a goal.
Yeah, because the net's wide open and he just tips it wide.
I don't hate Wade Allison being part of this team.
I agree.
I need to know that the guy can stay healthy for more than 10 games before I can feel confident in him.
I agree. And hopefully with a full off season, he's got a little time to...
Now, by the way, another aspect of some of the names that were mentioned. First of all, 6 prospects in there. First of all, why would Bobby Brink make the NHL unless he had the absolute best camp that anybody's ever seen straight out of college? That's number one.
Please tell me you're not taking Twitter replies seriously here.
No, I wasn't. Well,
okay.
This one I think I was, because I don't think there was any sarcasm in this should be the lineup. This was and you know why? Because there's enough mentions of players in the system that's hey, get some of these younger guys up, which is something a lot of people want to see. But then here's the other aspect. If you didn't think that this was a good lineup,
it's bad.
Well, no. But somebody thinks this is good, I think.
Right.
Because if you didn't think it was good, why would you replace a Konechny? Because Konechny's not mentioned.
Correct.
Giroux's gone, obviously.
Yep. JVR's gone.
JVR's gone. Frost isn't mentioned.
Yeah, did I hear Lindblom mentioned?
No.
Okay.
But somehow or other, all that's supposed to get you Johnny Gaudreau.
So somebody played NHL 22 and put trade difficulty on easy.
Maybe, I don't know. Either way, look, I think, and here's the thing. I think you swap out McEwen, Ratcliffe because Lashinsky, I think, could actually be a fourth-line center.
Sure.
But here's the problem. Lashinsky, Forster, Wisdom, they haven't played. They've dealt with injuries. They have not played. Allison as well. Now, Allison you could save for next season in terms of, hey, listen, if he stays healthy and plays the rest of this year, you do the same thing next year.
Totally.
Go into camp and hope that because he was making the team this year if he stayed healthy. If he didn't have the injury in the rookie game, he was going to be on the opening night roster.
All right. Before we get out of here, we do have to briefly touch on Claude Giroux playing his 1000th game. I know it's something we've kind of mentioned throughout the show. It is this Thursday in Nashville. There is a chance he hits some other milestones as well.
Against Nashville. They're
against
home.
Nashville. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're at home. No,
Right.
Because that's a big deal. Because, first of all, I don't know if you saw this, but there's like multiple places on Twitter that are giving away tickets for this game.
Wow. Man, I wish if I lived in town, I would seriously be considering it.
No. Now listen, it's done like a contest, so it's like outlets. But look,
Sure.
I'm not going to freak out over 20 tickets being available for giveaway from a bunch of different outlets. You're probably talking like no, because here's the thing.
It's to promote people want to be there.
Well, yeah, but listen, having tickets available to give away can also just as easily be, oh, you know what? Nashville doesn't have that many out-of-town people, or the family section's not as full, so we do have extra tickets.
Right. But either way, the building should be full, should be rocking. I expect the video package to be excellent.
There was a report, if you saw, I don't know if you saw, but there was a report that kind of indicated that like it's full. Like if you're, I don't know that. Like, I don't know that Claude Giroux is going to be, like, by the time we have our next show, if Claude Giroux is going to be a Flyer. That's probably
I don't
the
think he is either. And I wanted to programming note and say, by the way, that next week's
episode... He's going to be a Flyer on Thursday.
Yeah, next week's episode is going to be Monday evening after the trade deadline, after I'm done work. So
Right. Claude Giroux will be a Flyer on Thursday, though.
Yes.
And as far as I can tell.
And it's kind of annoying because that 3-day break before that Nashville game would be a good time to make a trade like that, but obviously you're not going to do that. Yeah, so Claude Giroux will be a Flyer on Thursday, and that might...
Correct. And listen, well, here's the thing. So because of that, whether he's dealt on Friday or Saturday or Sunday or even Monday, it's still a matter of they know what the significance of the 1000th game is. And it was even touched on the national broadcast for the Carolina game yesterday because
it was 998.
But Ray Ferraro said something along the lines of like, you kind of, it's along the lines of you don't see that every day, a guy who plays 1,000 with one team the whole way through. It's rare. It's impressive. You tip your cap to the guy kind of in a way, like all those types of things are what he was saying. And I'm under the impression if you do, anybody out there listening, if you do have tickets to that game, it's one you're not going to want to miss because it sounds like they're going to do some really special things for Giroux, knowing where things could be headed.
They're going to give him a golf bag. That's it.
Oh, that's horrible. No, they're not going to.
They're going to give him a golf bag and a hand bandage.
No,
remind him of that one time.
Right. I don't think they're even going to give him that.
Okay.
Because I think, like, first of all, I don't know that this has ever happened. It might, but I don't recall this being a thing. Like, there was a whole big deal about, like, Wayne Simmons just played in his 1000th game not long ago.
Yeah.
So people make up videos and they play the videos and all that stuff. You know, like.
By the way, that video package was Flyers light. There was no Flyers in Wayne Simmons' video package, and it annoyed me. Anyway.
Right. Either way, they didn't have the actual ceremony for him, though, until after the fact. Like, he plays, and then the next home game, you go, hey, hold on, we're going to honor you.
He played his 1000th game. Right.
Right. Could we possibly see, is there any doubt that he's going to be in the starting lineup on Thursday?
No, absolutely no doubt.
Like, be real. So could we actually, like, he hasn't technically taken the ice yet for his 1000th? Like, the game's not counted to his total yet, but here's your silver stick anyway?
Probably. Just because the Sunday game is not guaranteed that he'll still be a member of the roster, and if he is a member of the roster, there's no guarantee he'll be playing. Because they might just be like, hey, we're not going to play you and risk getting you hurt. Now, maybe they do something the following night in Ottawa because it is his hometown, and maybe there's something there. I don't know.
It doesn't make sense to me because of the fact that, like the point of it is to give him a send-off. So either he's around until Sunday, and they can do something on Sunday, even if he's just coming out in a suit.
Right.
Or...
I could see something like that happening. I could see them waiting until they can do their pregame whatever Sunday with him in the suit, and then trade him right after that game because that's an afternoon game, right?
Well, no, I don't. Here's the best way I can put it at this point. He's not missing a game.
Okay.
I don't think he's missing a game. I think he's going to continue to play and be dedicated to this team as the captain of this team, regardless of how they play and regardless of how the season's going and all that stuff. If he is still a member of the Flyers, he's still playing.
And you know what?
The only way that he does not play in a game, like Sunday, for example, is if Chuck Fletcher and management and all that stuff
have a deal on the table.
Are basically sitting there saying, listen, this thing's lined up and it probably is going to get done in the middle of this game.
Yep.
Or so close to the start of the game that we don't want you to prepare today. Skip the game. If you're still here, well, but here's the thing. It's never going to come down to that. Like, as I'm saying it,
because he's got the no move clause and he gets to veto anything.
He's going to get to say it. So either it's going to be before he preps for that game on Sunday.
Man, let him announce the trade. That'd be cool.
Like, to be honest, if anybody comes out and says Claude Giroux is not playing in a game prior to the trade deadline, outside
then he's
of
gone.
The deal is already done.
He's gone. Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm going to hit our socials real quick, but we're kind of going to leave it on the captain tribute here, I think. Follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast, Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find the show everywhere you find podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. Other than that, like I said, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow that over there. I really do think we leave it here on an ode to the captain, and I'm going to sign off. Oh, Captain, my captain.
Well, hold that until he's actually gone.
Well, he's going to be gone, so...
I mean, that's the working title I have for the top 10 Claude Giroux moments that I know I'm going to have to write, which I haven't started it yet because of the fact that, like, I really want to start to see that something gets closer to actually happening before I just tribute the whole thing.
Right.
So...
Well, Claude, whether it's, shortly after Thursday or right before the deadline or whether you come back next season or not, you were our captain.
Monday afternoon before we do the next episode.
You were our captain for a decade and we love you. So one day down the line, we know that we'll see you.